Ladies and gentlemen, the 11th Green Roundtable will begin shortly. I kindly ask you to take your seats, and in addition, please set your phone to silent mode for smooth progress of today's event. And I would like to provide a brief introduction on today's event. Shortly, the 11th Green Roundtable event organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will commence. This event is titled Global Governance to Address Plastic Pollution. English and Korean simultaneous interpretation will be provided throughout today's event. And please set your receivers on your table to channel 1 for Korean and channel 2 for English. Thank you. 네, 많은 분들 함께 해주고 계시는데
Thank you for joining us today. We are providing simultaneous interpretation for today's event. If you need simultaneous interpretation, please use the receiver on your table. You can set it to channel 1 for Korean and channel 2 for English. In addition, please make sure to set your phone to silent or vibrant mode before the event begins. We'll begin the event shortly.
Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 11th Green Roundtable. I am Sonyoung Park, and I've been given the honor of hosting this meaningful event. Before we begin, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude for taking your time away from your busy schedule to be with us today. The Green Roundtable was established in 2016 under the leadership of the Minister of Foreign Affairs as a forum for building networks and promoting collaboration among international organizations and relevant domestic agencies for green growth. It is an annual event, and this marks the 11th edition. It's also a great honor for me to be a part of this meaningful event. And this event will consist of two sessions. Session 1, Global Cooperation in Response to Plastic Pollution, and Session 2, How to Finance the Future Convention on Plastic Pollution. The sessions are being broadcasted online through our YouTube channel. Once again, we sincerely thank all attendees, both in person and online. I believe this event can touch you with a lot of insights so that you can stay with us until the end of the event. Right now, let us officially open the 11th Green Roundtable with the welcoming remarks from Her Excellency Hyun Jenny Kim, Ambassador and Deputy Minister for Climate Change, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea. I would like to invite Ambassador Hyun Jenny Kim to the stage for her welcoming remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming her with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon, everybody. Distinguished ambassadors and diplomatic community colleagues, distinguished guests, panelists and speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by extending a warm welcome to all of you here at the 11th Green Round Table. I would like to express my gratitude to the distinguished speakers and panelists who will lead today's discussion. Green Roundtable is the flagship forum in the field of green diplomacy that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has held every year since 2016 in order to provide a platform for participants to form networks and creative positive synergies for green transition. This year, we are pleased to bring together experts and stakeholders from Korea and abroad, as well as the diplomatic corps in Korea, under the theme of global governance to address plastic pollution. The theme of today's roundtable is highly timely. In 2022, the international community decided at the 5th UN Environment Assembly, UNEA, to establish a legally binding instrument to tackle plastic pollution. And the final Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meeting is scheduled to be held in Busan at the last week of November this year. There is no need to say why plastic pollution issue is critical. More than 430 million tons of plastics are produced each year, 2/3 of which are discarded as waste after being used just once. We all know how serious the problem of single-use plastic is. If this trend continues, plastic waste will triple by 2060 with dire, irrevocable consequences for both human health and the environment of this planet. I remember my days I spent in Senegal, a beautiful country in West Africa. I was Korean ambassador to Senegal in the past. That country doesn't produce even a single bottle of plastic. However, the beautiful coast areas alongside the Atlantic Ocean of the country, many of them is covered by plastic waste, which is really, really sad. Many countries, particularly developing countries and small island countries, they are suffering from plastic pollution. So, plastic pollution is a global issue, and it needs a global action all together by global community. Plastics are also a substantial contribution to the global greenhouse gas emission as we imagine. In 2019, plastics generated 1.8 billion tons of greenhouse gas emission, which account for 3.4% of the global total emissions. By 2060, emissions from the plastic life cycle are expected to more than double if we just follow the business as usual, reaching 4.3 billion tons. These numbers attest to the urgency of addressing plastic pollutions. Therefore, climate action and plastic action, they are two very closely interlinked challenges for the humankind. The international community is now negotiating to conclude an agreement to tackle plastic pollution by the end of this year. That's why November INC 5 in Busan is critical. Key issues such as primary plastic polymers, chemicals and polymers of concerns, waste management, enhancing product circularity, microplastics, financing and other means of implementation are being vigorously discussed. There are many, many issues to be further negotiated. And there are gaps. I must confess very frankly that there are gaps between positions among countries. However, despite different positions on key issues, all participating countries must recognize the seriousness of the plastic problem and share common understanding on the urgency to address this global challenge. Let me emphasize that this is a global challenge and we need collective action. As the host country of INC 5, Korea will do our part by providing the best venue and facilities to accommodate different views and expedite the negotiations. International cooperation is crucial, as I already emphasized, to address plastic pollution, and Korea is ready to play a leading role towards these efforts by sharing our experiences. Korea introduced the extended producer responsibility, which is called EPR, system in 2003, and it has been in operation for nearly 20 years. As a leading country in circular economy policies, Korea is willing to share its experience and knowledge with other nations, contributing to resolving plastic pollutions. The establishment of the agreement is our imminent goal, but it is not the end of our task to address this plastic issue. I would like to emphasize that agreement is one thing and implementation is another. Of course, we have to reach an agreement in Busan in November. However, that agreement must be implementable and practical for action in reality. Efforts and commitments are required, not only from governments through the plastic treaty, but also from every stakeholders, business, citizens, NGOs, academia, all of them, they must play a part in these collective efforts. It is really a time to recognize the urgency of the challenge by curbing single-use products and excessive packaging as well. I quite often heard, particularly from expatriates in this society, that Korean companies are investing a lot in packaging. So sometimes my foreign friends living in Korea, they are asking questions to me like that. Oh, I received a present of 1 box of apples. I'm wondering whether box is the present or apple is the present. So we really need to improve our packaging system, and also we really need to change our behaviors. Other issues like promotion of the use of recycled materials and developing alternative materials such as bio-based plastics must be addressed in the negotiations as well. That's why I would like to say that today's roundtable is meaningful. There will be many, many issues to be discussed by experts, and then I hope we can learn each other and we can get insights. I hope that today's Green Roundtable will serve as an opportunity to unite the will of all relevant actors and share excellent ideas. This roundtable is not just to confirm the differences of positions or differences of views. This must be the opportunity to unite our willingness and political commitments. Once again, thank you very much, all of you, for coming to this afternoon, and I wish all of you have a very useful and insightful time this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Janet Kim, for your warm welcoming message. Like she mentioned, this is a time to take global action together, and we believe that today's meeting will play a meaningful role in quickly finding positive synergy under the theme of this year as a meeting, Global Governance. Thank you very much. And as you now well know, today's event marks the 11th anniversary of the event hosted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In celebration of this occasion, Ambassador from His Excellency Heung-sik Jo, Ambassador for Climate Environment, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea, has sent us videos with the congratulatory remarks. Please take a look.
Distinguished ambassadors and members of the diplomatic corporations, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you all today to the 11th Green Roundtable. I'm Hong-sik Jo, Ambassador for Climate and Environment at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I deeply regret that I could not join you in person and meet with you due to prior commitments. However, I am delighted to deliver my congratulatory remarks virtually on this significant occasion. To foster networking in green environment diplomacy and strengthen international cooperation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs hosts the Green Roundtable annually, each year with a different theme. This year, reflecting the growing importance of addressing plastic pollution, we have chosen global governance to address plastic pollution as the theme of the roundtable. We are living in an age of plastic. Developed in the early 20th century, plastic has been used across all industries, including food and beverage packaging, chemicals, construction, textiles, and electronics due to its outstanding convenience and economic value. However, while plastic has provided material abundance and improved the quality of life for humanity, it has also become a major pollutant threatening our ecosystem as we have become accustomed to its convenience. Annually, 400 million tons of plastic waste are generated, but less than 10% is recycled. We now face the grim reality of plastic waste island in the ocean and marine animals found dead with their stomachs full of plastic. To address the increasingly severe problem of plastic pollution, the international community agreed at the 5th UN Environment Assembly in 2022 to establish an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, with the ambition of completing its work by the end of 2024. 4 negotiation meetings have been held so far. However, there remain significant differences among countries on several issues, including the production of plastic polymer, chemicals and polymer of concern, waste management, financial mechanisms, and implementation measures. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to reiterate that the UN member states have committed to establish an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution by the end of this year. Given the limited time and the current gaps among nations, achieving the agreement seems like an incredibly challenging task. However, considering our future generations, it is a global imperative that we cannot afford to delay. As the head of Korean delegation to the INC 3 held in Kenya last year, I reiterated Korea's strong willingness to contribute to the negotiation by successfully hosting the INC 5, which will be held in Busan from November 25th to December 1st, 2024. As the global pivotal state, we contribute to establishing international norms in the environmental field, ending plastic pollution, and transitioning to a circular economy. The plastic treaty is our future. The international community has committed to taking immediate action towards the long-term elimination of plastic pollution and strengthening global cooperation urgently. Preparation from the public, businesses, and society as a whole will be necessary to open the new chapter of our future. I believe this Green Roundtable will serve as a platform to strengthen cooperation among the public, businesses, and society as a whole, and prepare for our post-plastic society. I look forward to productive discussions during the Roundtable for our forthcoming future. Thank you.
Please give him a big round of applause. Thank you. It was an impressive message which provides deeper insights into the 11th Green Roundtable. Next, Dr. Frank Rice-Berman, Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute, has sent us videos with welcoming remarks. Let's take a look.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you here at GGI for the 11th Green Roundtable organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea. The focus of this event today is on the Plastic Treaty. We congratulate Korea for having secured the 5th and hopefully final negotiating session here in Korea that will, we hope, produce a plastic treaty. And yes, plastic is one of the 3 key elements of the deep sustainability crisis that we are experiencing, together with climate and the loss of biodiversity. Pollution, particularly plastic, is threatening life on Earth, I believe. So I hope that we will see success of the plastic treaty, and at GGI we've begun to prepare. We've begun to work with our member countries to see if the treaty comes into place, what do countries need to do to live up to their expectations and obligations of the treaty? What kind of reporting requirement, what kind of policy measures are likely to be linked to the treaty? And as GGI has had a number of years of experience working on waste management, more recently expanded to include circular economy and with a clear focus on plastic, we believe that there are also investment projects which can already proactively address issues to deal with plastic particularly, circular economy more generally, and waste management that is a priority for many of our member countries. I wish you a wonderful event and I hope that we will all be able to celebrate the success of the 5th negotiating session later this year with a completed plastic treaty. Thank you.
Thank you. Big hands, please. It was a very meaningful message to the 11th Green Roundtable and our global society. And next, we will have a group photo session with Her Excellency Hyun Jenny Kim, Ambassador, and today's speakers who have honored us with their presence. So, ladies and gentlemen, the speakers and Ambassador, please come up to the stage, following the guidance from our staff. Yes, this event is becoming more significant with each passing year. Its importance in reaching international consensus is growing, so that is why this kind of meeting is very significant and important. So now we can see our speakers and Ambassador Hyun Jenny Kim line up on the stage. So we'll take 2 photos, one with a smile, so we'll make a smile. How about green? Say green, please. Green. Thank you. And one more picture with a hand gesture, the signature hand gesture of a Korean fighting. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, fighting! Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him a big round of applause once again. Thank you very much. And we hope that the valuable time you have dedicated today will lead to the formation of meaningful networks and collaboration among the government, international organizations, and academia and businesses in the fields of climate environment and green economy. Now moving on to the first session of the 11th Green Roundtable, titled Global Cooperation in Response to Plastic Pollution. So we will begin with the first presentation. First Secretary Min Sung-seo from the Green Diplomacy Division, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, will present an overview of the UN Plastic Treaty. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Min Sung-seo, Deputy Director at Green Diplomacy Division of ROK, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's an honor to be here at today's Green Roundtable to give you an overview of the UN Plastic Treaty. 오늘 한국 분들도 많이 와주셨.
I see many Koreans are attending this Korean Roundtable, but for the sake of diplomatic corps in Korea and for the accurate information sharing, I would like to touch upon my presentations in English. Please understand that kindly.
On the treaty, recognizing the escalating issue of plastic pollution, the international community at the UN Environment Assembly in 2022 committed to developing an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, with the ambition of completing its work by the end of 2024. For the convenience, I will refer to the instrument as the UN Plastic Treaty. UN member states agreed to establish the committee and to develop this work by holding 5 INC sessions. Until now, 4 meetings were held, and the final negotiation meeting will be held in Busan from November 25th to December 1st this year. Previous sessions were held in Uruguay, France, Kenya, and Canada. Until the 3rd session, Peru chaired, and Ecuador has since taken over, supported by INC Secretariat and Bureau members. If we reach a consensus within the INC 5, then the diplomatic conference will be held next year, and parties will sign the treaty at the conference. Rwanda, Peru, Senegal, and Ecuador are candidates to host this conference, but still it is not decided yet because the focus should be given to the current challenge of reaching the agreement. During the previous meetings, member states discussed objects, scopes, regulations, and means of implementation. And INC Secretariat revealed 3 versions of the text, which is zero draft, revised draft, and compilation of draft text. You can see the whole text on the UNEP website, so please refer to it if you need. Countries made efforts to build shared understanding and identify areas of convergence, but the differences among countries is still significant. At the INC 4 Canada, countries streamlined the text, but still the newly released compilation text spans 77 pages, and it shows how challenging it is to reach an agreement. Moving forward, I will outline key issues addressed in the treaty negotiation. First, primary plastic polymers and chemicals of concern. A primary plastic polymer is a large molecule composed of repeating structural units called monomers. Plastics are a subset of synthetic polymers, exhibiting a wide range of properties, including versatility, lightweight, and durability. Primary plastic polymers refer to the major type of polymers that are commonly produced, such as proethylene, PE, and propylene, PP. Yeah, I know. It sounds like we are in a chemistry class, right? But don't worry, I'm also a novice on this matter. I try my best to follow up the issue. To put it simply, primary polymer is an ingredient for plastics. And polymers are a central issue of the negotiations. Some countries emphasize reducing polymer production to combat pollution, while others object to setting global production and consumption targets, maintaining that the focus should be given to waste management, rather than production controls. Regarding chemicals and polymers of concern, there is broad support for measures on the use of chemicals, but some members prefer nationally driven measures rather than listing chemicals in the annex. Secondly, problematic products and product design. I believe you might be curious about what qualifies as problematic. It refers here to short-lived or single-use products. There is broad recognition of the importance of product design to enhance durability and reuse. However, opinions differ on whether to establish global criteria, targets, and minimum recycled plastic contents versus allowing nationally determined measures that consider national circumstances and capabilities. Third, extended producer responsibility and waste management. Extended producer responsibility, EPR system, refers to the waste management concept that makes producers and importers of products take responsibility for the recycling of their post-consumption waste. Korea, for instance, has operated on EPR system since 2003. I think our next presenter, Ms. Lee from Ministry of Environment, will provide more details on this system. There are varying levels of support among members for the EPR system. Some prefer to establish EPR system based on the modalities in the annex, while others express concerns about the feasibility and cost of implementing the universal system. Last, financial mechanism and means of implementation. Some representatives express the view that the financial mechanism for the instrument should be based solely on a new, dedicated multilateral fund, while others advocate using existing mechanisms such as the Global Environmental Facility. And developing countries argue the newly dedicated mechanism should be provided by developed countries, emphasizing common but differentiated responsibility. Regarding the implementation and compliance, some argue that it is crucial to establish robust compliance mechanisms, including regular reviews and reporting statistical data on types and volumes of polymers and products. On the other hand, other countries advocate for flexible compliance mechanisms that take into account national circumstances and capabilities. The final slide is our way forward. At the INC4 in Canada, after lengthy discussion ending at 3 a.m., the committee decided to establish an open-ended intersessional expert group. As seen, there are various areas requiring scientific and technical information. During the intersessional work, experts will develop an analysis of potential resources that could be mobilized for the implementation of the treaty and identify criteria and non-criteria for regulating plastic products and chemicals of concern. Despite 4 negotiation meetings, significant differences persist among countries on key issues. As the global pivotal state, ROK will contribute to the negotiation by successfully hosting the INC5, which will be held in Busan this year. Personally, I think reaching an agreement is very challenging, given the current disparities. However, addressing plastic pollution demands urgent international cooperation, So delay is not our option. I wish member countries will achieve fruitful outcomes at INC 5 in Busan, guided by the spirit of multilateral cooperation. Our goal is to establish the instrument which is both effective and feasible that addresses the full life cycle of plastics as provided in the UNEA resolutions. And it should be supported by scientific evidence. Thank you for your attention, and I will conclude my presentation to respect our time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Min Sung-so. It was a very informative presentation. In international agreements where transparency is emphasized, it is essential to establish agreements that everyone can adhere to through a more scientific and rational approach. Next, we have the second presentation titled Transition Towards a Circular Economy for Plastics by Jae-kyung Lee, Program Officer, Ministry of Environment. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jae-kyung Lee, the Program Officer in the Resource Circulation Division of Ministry of Environment. I am very thrilled to be here today, and I would like to thank MOFA for organizing this event and giving me this wonderful opportunity. 한국 분들도 계시지만 서민성
There are Korean speakers here, but as with Mr. Seo, I'm going to present in English for accurate presentation.
Aimed at transitioning towards a circular economy for plastics that Ministry of Environment and Republic of Korea is currently implementing. To start, I'll provide some background on the issue and then introduce Korea's policies to enhance plastic circularity, including our newly established Act on Circular Economy. Plastics were once celebrated for their convenience, efficiency, and affordability, but are now a major contributor to global pollution. Annually, the world produces around 400 million tons of plastic waste, significantly impacting our carbon budget, with emissions expected to reach 19% of the global carbon budget. Much of this mismanaged plastic ends up polluting rivers, lakes, and the ocean. According to the OECD, global plastic waste could reach 1 billion tons by 2060, with only around 20% of them recycled, worsening leakage and emissions issues. The global concern has led to the new agenda, a shift from a linear economy, which relies heavily on resource extraction, massive production, and mass disposal, to the circular economy that emphasizes resource efficiency through reuse, recycling, and recovering. Domestically, we have implemented all diverse measures for the transition to the circular economy. And since 2018, and you can see the current policies that we are trying to achieve right now, we have established a countermeasure of a whole lifespan of products for combating plastics in 2022 October. And we have established a K-Circular Economy Action Plan in 2023 June, and this year we have enforced the Act on the Promotion of Transition to a Circular Economy and Society. Domestically, our strategic vision aims for zero waste, carbon neutrality, and circular economy. Through three main strategies that you can see in the slide, First one is reducing single-use plastics. Second, enhancing plastics recycling. And lastly, preventing the leakage to the marine environment and other vulnerable areas. To give some specific implementations that we are currently having. To reduce single-use plastics, we are moving from single-use to multi-use plastics through rental and sharing services, consumer incentives. So as you can see, it is basically a market-driven approach alongside the regulations. And we are developing guidelines for manufacturing and using multi-use containers and providing financial support to service providers in collaboration with the local governments. Additionally, we are offering incentives to consumers who use multi-use containers or visit eco-friendly refill stores. In 2022 and 2023, approximately 2 billion won of incentives were distributed to the consumers who are very eager to participate in the circular economy. In recycling efforts, it is really crucial to stabilize waste circulation as feedstock and to improve quality throughout the recycling process, starting from discharge, collection, transportation, sorting, and through all the process. Korea employs a solid waste separation system in households and industries. As you have all be familiar with, we have many collection spots, and even with plastics, we will separate them with PE, PP, transparent PET bottles, and about like 8 types of plastics. Also, we utilize low comprehension vehicles to maintain waste quality during collection, and we are also integrating AI and robust sorting systems to enhance sorting efficiency and also worker safety. Additionally, we are addressing recyclability challenges in product design and manufacturing by mandating recyclability assessment for packaging materials. Products that pose difficulty in recycling assessments are rated as poor. They often have issues like inseparable caps or pumps from containers. They have multiple material types in one container, which they all hinder the recycling process. I believe that our Ms. Lee from Coca-Cola could give more abundant examples on how to make a packaging with circularity in the later presentation. And this recyclability assessment is very directly interlinked to the EPR system that Ambassador Hyun Kim and First Secretary Mr. Seo has mentioned. The EPR system, the extended producer responsibility, when we are operating the system, we give incentives to the producers that produce the products that are rated excellent. And when the products are rated poor, we give some penalties to them. Of course. And like many other countries, South Korea is expanding the use of recycled materials. We have mandated the manufacturers and material producers to incorporate recycled content in products such as paper, glass, iron, and plastic products. And currently, the minimum target for recycled PET content in plastic products is 3%, and we are planning to increase this to 30% by 2030. Additionally, to prevent environmental leakage, it's actually very rainy season in Korea. It is really crucial to intensify the waste collection along riversides before flood seasons, before it is leaked to the marine environment. Korea is working with local communities, especially with the elderly, to handle this issue. Moreover, the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries has introduced a tagging system for fishing gear since 2022, and it has increased the number of shipboard waste collection stations. Also, expanding waste collection and treatment in rural areas is also a priority to ensure that all waste is properly managed. Subsidies are being used to enhance collection of agricultural plastic waste and to prevent illegal waste incineration. Collaboration with local governments is underway to expand related infrastructure. These are the primary measures currently being implemented in South Korea. I would also like to briefly introduce the Act on Circular Economy, which was enacted in 2022 and now in effect. The actual real name of the act is Act on the Promotion of Transition to a Circular Economy and Society. We all know that it is a really long name, so we just shorten it, the Act on Circular Economy. The act aims to minimize resource waste, reduce waste generation, and to prioritize circularity throughout the process. And as you can read through the principle, you can easily notice that we have followed the waste hierarchy system, which refers to the system that gives top priority to waste prevention, followed by reusing, recycling, recovery, and the final disposal. The act is structured around these four phases: raw material, production, distribution, and consumption. And although this act also covers recycling and disposal, South Korea already has a really strong, sturdy legislative acts on those areas: Act on the Waste Management and Act on the Recycling of Products. So this Act on Circular Economy mostly covers these four stages that you can see on the slide. Within the raw material phase, we pursue to give support to promote the use of circular raw materials, supporting R&D for material development and commercialization. And we have expanded the scope of circular usability assessment in the production stage. Initially, it focused on disposal, but we have widened it with assessing usage of circular raw material, durability, repairability, and even the carbon footprints. And within the distribution stage, we obliged efforts to enhance circularity of packaging material for retailers and distributors. And lastly, we are enhancing consumer rights to repair through ensuring spare parts availability. Also, we have, within this act, this legislation introduces two new policies aimed at boosting research and development. First one is the regulatory sandbox. Some of you may be really familiar with it because the regulatory sandbox was originally started in the United Kingdom, and it is a system that allows the testing of new and innovative technologies when they are not compliant with the existing legal frameworks. We have made a regulatory sandbox committee with participation of government, educational, private sectors, and also civil society to decide whether the technology needs a regulatory sandbox or not. Also, we have introduced the end-of-waste designation system, which designate and publicly notify high-quality waste-derived materials to lose their waste status. They are no longer waste anymore when they are proven to meet the environmental and economic criteria. In closing, South Korea is very committed to pioneering the sustainable future, circular economy, with our strong mandates on recycled materials, preventing environmental leakage, and comprehensive legislative frameworks to, like the Act on Circular Economy. With ongoing collaboration and innovative policies, we are very committed to fostering a greener and more resilient future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Cha Young-lee, for sharing valuable information. It was a meaningful time to clearly understand the current status of South Korea's strategic direction and current trends and how far it has progressed. Now for the third presentation, titled Perspectives on Global Innovation Strategy in Plastic Circular Economy by Euna Kim, Head of Innovative Growth Group, National Assembly Futures Institute. Let's invite her onto the stage. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's very honored to be here. I'm Euna Kim from National Assembly Futures Institute. Well, my mother tongue is Korean, so unlike previous presenters, I'd like to use my mother tongue for effective delivery of message. I hope this works better for all of us. 안녕하세요. 저는 국회미래연구원.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kim Eun-ah, Head of Innovative Growth Group of the National Assembly Future Institute. In a mid and long-term perspectives, I would like to talk about the innovative strategy based on the back testing and what kind of perspectives that we have to bring out for the future. And that's how I have prepared my presentation material today. The global innovative growth. What does this mean exactly? Let me start from that question. When it comes to environment pollution, we say that the first solution to that, to address that question, is to find the source. Like you close the faucet on the screen. So through the reuse of the materials, we want to reduce and minimize the leakage of environmental resources. And for your information, I asked ChatGPT to draw an imaginative illustration of a circular economy, and that's what I have. And if you think about what we need to address plastic pollution, or more widely, the pollution, the current circular economy system would not do enough. Then what will be the mainstream of the circular economy? How can we shift the circular economy into the mainstream with different strategies? Well, there are some strategies that have not drawn the attention from the public. However, there should be a global innovative strategies that has not been in the mainstream up until now. So why global innovative strategies are so important? First, we have to approach this norm through global norm setting, which means that we have to have a consensus of the global community to head to a certain direction, like a plastic treaty. That should be a consensus on the direction for the future for the humanity. Then we want to narrow down to details such as how to consume and how to set the norm for the sake of circular economy. And to that end, we need an international standard. So, again, intergovernmental or international cooperation or collaboration is needed. With a norm, we can be safely working in the mainstream. And the second element is circular value chain. For the time being, the industry of circular economy is being converted from a linear economy by putting the focus on producers. However, with the circular value chain, that will be completely different because in Korea, for instance, where we do not have many resources, we get the we get the supply from resource-rich countries. However, with the circular value chain, we can have a circular economy in reality to share different resources. And the last element, let's say that we already set the global norm and the circular value chain that could be implemented at a global level. So what's most important in that must be technological innovation. So that's why I came up with greater impact as the last element. In Plastic Treaty, we also touch upon the technological aspect, and through global cooperation and intergovernmental and the business level cooperation, we can maximize the impact of our action. So these three elements could be pivotal pillars for the circular economy. And I have some other factors to talk about. For example, the first one is international standardization. This is the contents of international standardization. I looked through details of these standardization text, and all these contents have been already touched upon in the draft. For instance, eco-design in European Union is the one, and how to do the product design, and how we could control the content ratio of reusable and refillable materials, and the standards related to this product level or the substance level has been already indicated and stipulated in the draft. And one another option was about hazardous substances, how these information about hazardous substances should be labeled. So these contents have already been stipulated in the international standardization text. And if you would like to know the updates of this content, there's an international standardization organization, and they have a circular economy related TC, technical committee. And for the circular economy, they now discuss the publication of standards for the circular economy in the future, and some of them have been already published and some others are under preparation. So except a small number of developing countries, almost all the countries are already engaging in the process of standardization internationally to reach a consensus. So there's a governance. Well, before, I have talked about the international standardization of the global circular economy, but at each country's level, we still have lots of efforts for the standardization at a national level. So circular economy, including the plastic circulation, the reuse of the plastic circulation, we need lots of technical committees and technical aspects, and we need further development on that. And Korea has been quite active, but we need further engagement of Korea. It is not enough yet for the future, and I would like to recommend the engagement from the private sector as well. And the second part is pertaining to technical aspect concerning plastic treaty, which is quite close to environmental change treaty, and there has been lots of challenges to tackle because technology and industry, they are always in competition. So it's not easy to get a consensus or get to meet together in the middle between technology, industry, and the environment. But according to the result of my personal survey until last year, some recent global initiatives are already touching upon the investment from banks and from multinational companies, and they try to establish a consortium with developing countries so that they can grow the plastic economy in a voluntary way. So like this case, if you look at these type of examples, we can imagine that there's a specific characteristics of technological transfer, and this technological transfer will give us more opportunities to expand the market and to explore new opportunities, which has a little different personalities from technological transfer and environment agreement. And that should be kind of a new hope. And lastly, let me shift the gear to Korea. What kind of circular economy related contents are under discussion, and what elements have been missed during the discussion? Well, before, the content was more conceptual and more policy related. But if you read some media articles, the plastic circular economy is a bit different and comprehensive. I mean, it's high level. Well, in terms of volume, the media has lots of articles about international standardization. And let me touch upon some contents. Well, most of the articles have touched upon the investment from businesses and from private sector, which means, if I'm not wrong, that the biggest growth engine in Korea for the circular plastic economy is to tap into opportunities within private sector, including businesses. This is not about a question of right or wrong, but it could be a good stepping stone to expand our impact on a global level, because financial mechanism always works in terms of concept. And we are now talking about a newly emerging industries, including circular economy in relation with plastics like ESG and some green growth. And once these elements are well combined with circular economy, how can we make a tangible asset? And that's where we have to delve into more details with private sector. And lastly, because I was not sure if I tapped into every important element of the circular economy, I just added up the last slide at the last moment. Well, in political areas, I had an impression that Korea is more focusing on production. However, the circular economy is more of having a longer and more diverse loop so that we can ensure an effective use of resources by minimizing the waste. So the efficiency in consumption should be the one that we have to think more about. From the business model perspectives, what kind of international cooperation are we having? So I'm not sure if we have an answer to that question. Well, the plastic waste, if you look at the volume of plastic waste in Korea versus 2010, it's an apple-to-apple comparison, and we are unrivaled #1 in the world. This is a kind of shame to our country. So with that, Korea has been investing a lot in circular economy, and Korea has high interest in this area. But with business as usual, we will not be able to tell the world that we have been doing good. So with that, I would like to wrap up my presentation here. Thank you.
Ken, for your informative presentation. It was a time to reflect on how we can take a step closer to a plastic circular economy through global initiatives and innovation strategies. Next presentation will be presented by Chang-Hyu Choi, Vice President Lotte Chemical, under the theme of the current status of Lotte Chemicals, Plastic Pollution Response Technology Development. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming him with a big round of applause.
네, 안녕하세요.
Hello everyone, I am Chang-Hyo Choi from Lotte Chemical. My English is not very good, so I would like to present in Korean for an accurate presentation of my materials. I work at the Lotte Chemical Research Institute and I'm overseeing eco-friendly plastic development. And as mentioned by Mr. Seo earlier, I am working in the chemistry field. Lotte Chemical is one of the companies that produce plastic significantly in Korea, so we feel responsible for managing plastic, and that's why we have a lot of plans and grand visions for addressing these issues. So I would like to give you an overview of those plans, and I have worked with peers from other companies and have been very interested in the circular economy and the eco-friendly development of plastic. So once again, I feel very honored to be standing before you today. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. We talk about plastic pollution from various perspectives. I think we can think about three large perspectives. First is the plastic waste itself. As mentioned earlier, the plastic waste island, 3 plastic waste islands in the Pacific Ocean that are the size of the Republic of Korea, and inside the stomachs of whales and other marine animals, plastic waste is threatening their livelihood. The second issue is microplastics. Their toxicity levels have not been thoroughly studied, but many people assume that they will be proven toxic, and there has been research that shows that people eat 3 credit cards worth of plastic every week. And we've talked about climate change in the previous sessions, and if you look at the graph on the right side, you see the CO2 concentration and the temperature increase in accordance with the CO2 concentration increase. We had a lot of downpour 2 days ago in Korea, and these adverse weather events are also being caused by greenhouse gas emissions. I believe those 3 large categories can represent the problems caused by plastic. And at the UN General Assembly, I feel that the heavier focus is given to climate change because that is a bigger threat to the humanity. As other presenters have talked about the effect of plastic on the CO2 emissions, I looked up some studies, and 35% comes from heating HVAC of buildings, and 20% from transportation, and the third largest is steel and textile and chemical and cement. So these contributions from the industry can increase from 5% to 19% going forward. So that's why Lotte Chemical feels more responsible for managing plastic wisely. So is a solution to this plastic issue the elimination of plastic? I went to a seminar the other day, and a professor there gave me somewhat of a paradox. He said, plastic is the most eco-friendly material in the current situation. And the reason for that is, if you look on the box on the left side of the slide, you see the annual consumption of wooden chopsticks in China, which means that you have to destroy 25 million trees to accommodate this consumption. This means that when we eliminate plastic, we need to come up with an alternative. Can it be steel, aluminum, steel, wood, or botanicals? However, because of the global population, the immense global population, those resources would be gone immediately if we were to replace plastic with natural resources. So maybe plastic is the most eco-friendly material in the current situation. And before we get to plastic, we use the tool of LCA, life cycle assessment, a lot when we talk about the effect of plastic on the environment. So I picked 4 categories. So greenhouse gas emissions and acidification, eutrophication, and total energy. In terms of these 4 categories, This is the LCA evaluation of refrigerated dairy product bottles by material. So if it's made of HDPE and glass, the red is glass and green is HDPE and blue is plastic PET. And which is most environmentally friendly? You can see it's the PET. So the answer, the solution is to promote circular economy, not just to eliminate plastic altogether. And another thing is to reduce CO2 emissions. So by using biomass plastic, we can reduce CO2 emissions. You can see that those are the conclusions that are being made currently. And if you look at the left side, you see the blue in CO2 emissions and orange for CO2 reductions. The left side shows physical recycling. And the middle one is a chemical recycling. And on the right side is a thermal recycling. So you burn plastic and you produce energy. CO2 reduction is the most effective in terms of mechanical recycling. However, what's the impact on the climate by using PET plastic and using mechanical recycling? There is only a very minimal amount of plastic that can be recycled mechanically, because there are not that many types of single material plastics. Most are composite materials or colored. So in order to recycle them, we have to go through chemical recycling. It's a must. And if we don't use chemical recycling, then the rest would have to be thermally recycled, and that produces a lot of CO2. And on the right side, you see bioplastics. On the left side, the two bars on the left side are bioplastics, and on the right side are PLA plastic. So HDPE, LDPE on the left side, and on the right side, you see BioPE in the middle. It's made from sugarcane, and the alcohol from the sugarcane is turned into BioPE. So green is CO2 carbon uptake. And biomass plastic, you can see that it reduces carbon because it absorbs carbon. This is not really chemistry, but engineering. But if we were to categorize the recycling methods, you see the material recycle process on the left side. And from the energy perspective, you see the red part, thermal recycle. And the global trend shows that because of the large CO2 emissions from thermal recycling, a lot of people are turning to material recycling. As I mentioned earlier, there's physical recycling and chemical recycling under material recycling, but I will skip over the details here. However, physical recycling is to turn plastic into other forms of plastic, and chemical recycling is to turn plastic into its raw materials. So physical recycling could lower the quality of the recycled plastic, or maybe in terms of purity, it could be lacking. But chemical recycling is the same as just producing the raw materials, because you are turning and converting plastic into the raw materials. At Lotte Chemical, we have been doing mechanical recycling under physical recycling for a long time. And we are currently in the process of developing solvent extraction, and we are preparing for depolymerization and pyrolysis, which is to turn plastic into its raw material form, is also being worked on, and we plan to produce materials using this process soon. McKinsey has produced this data. As of 2020, about 370 million plastic was produced and used. But McKinsey expects that the plastic demand will grow at a CAGR of 3% until 2050, meaning that we will be using an increasing amount of plastic. And interestingly, 60% of the feedstock is projected to be derived from recycling. Usually, we produce plastic from crude oil or polymer, but then by 2050, only 40% of the feedstock is projected to be derived from the traditional fossil fuels and 60% from recycling. and 30% by physical recycling, and the rest of the 30%, the remaining 30%, will be divided among depolymerization and pyrolysis. That's the projection by McKinsey. If you look at the growth rate of the industry, you can see that the plastic industry is expected to grow by 3% annually, and depolymerization and pyrolysis are expected to increase by 18%, 17% more significantly. And in Korea, there is a great interest in developing pyrolysis processes, and there are many policies in place to promote these. Lotte Chemical is committed to circularity, and we have the ESG vision under which we have committed to the Lotte Chemical's Green Promise 2030. The first is net zero, and second, circulation, coexistence. That's the second pillar, and the third pillar is green innovation. Net zero refers to carbon neutrality, and under the circular economy vision, we aim to produce and sell 1 million tons of plastic by 2030, the recycled plastic. It's a very ambitious goal. And under green innovation, we can turn our attention to green energy, such as hydrogen energy and expanding battery material business. Other than that, you can see also on the bottom, from 2009, we are the only company in Korea to produce bio-PET in Korea. Other than the circularity, we're also currently developing biodegradable plastics. In the course of our business, as I was preparing for this presentation, I was asked by the organizer to also address some challenges that we're facing. First is when we are securing waste plastic compared to other advanced countries, there can be some areas of improvement. Of course, compared to other countries, such as developing countries, our recycling technology is more advanced. However, the benchmarks we usually set are found in European countries, especially Germany. If you look on the left side, you see the waste sorting center in Korea, and you see the automated sorting center in Germany on the right side, and there's no one there. It's unmanned, so the efficiency level is lower in Korea. Because people can't really classify PPE accurately by looking at the bottles with infrared goggles. They have to look at the labels. And many waste goes to fuel recycling. But if you look at the German side, there's no one working here. Everything is automated by AI. And the plastic is shredded and pelletized. And the sorting rate is very high. And secondly, collection is done well in Korea because we can provide jobs to elderly people who would work as garbage collectors. However, the sorting facilities could see some room for improvement. Bigger facilities handle 20,000 to 30,000 tons, but most smaller ones handle only 5,000 tons. PCR, the raw plastic, is cheaper in Korea compared to Germany, but because cost efficiency is important, it's important for companies to secure inexpensive materials. But large companies cannot take part in sorting. We need more investment from large businesses. However, there's lack of investment for the sorting facilities, and I hope that there could be some improvement in this area going forward. And next, Next is a policy part on the right side. And you know, a lot of businesses talk about policy improvement, such as incentives and deregulation. And there's some demand for strengthening regulations as well. And that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit more. If you look at the graph, you see a lot of words, reuse, repair, recycling. You see some words here. On the left side is the least costly items, and on the right side is the most costly areas. So for buildings, it's cheaper to build a new building than to reuse. So from the economic perspective, we should move toward the left in terms of the economic efficiency. However, the recycling areas are located on the right side. The red line is the carbon credit cost. It's about $60 per ton. If you don't recycle, you have to pay the carbon credit tax. You have to pay more because of the carbon tax. If you recycle and it is acknowledged as recycling, then you don't have to pay carbon tax. So the fields on the right side are now gaining more economic power because you don't have to pay carbon tax. And in Europe, you have to pay carbon tax or national tax if you don't recycle. So it's pushing up the carbon credit cost upward. So those are the driving forces and incentives that can drive more businesses to concentrate on recycling and commit to recycling. Thank you for listening to my presentation today.
Mr. Chang Yu-Chua for sharing valuable insights. Since strategies to address plastics are now a necessity rather than a choice, so I believe that the opportunity to review the response strategies of a large corporation like Lotte Chemical has been very helpful. Thank you very much. And now, for the fifth presentation, I would like to invite Jin Young Lee, Public Affairs Director, Coca-Cola Korea Company, under the theme of Coca-Cola's sustainable packaging efforts. She's on the stage, so please welcome her with a big round of applause.
안녕하세요. 한국 코카콜라의
Good afternoon. I am Jin Young Lee from Coca-Cola Korea. Well, concerning the operation of plastic and reuse of plastic, we would like to introduce our activities at a company level. So the table of contents is as follows. Let me introduce our company first, and global sustainability goal centered on world without waste and sustainable packaging across the world and our efforts in Korea. As you all know, Coca-Cola was born around 137 years ago, and it has a significant global presence in more than 200 countries. And all products that we produce are covering 200 master brands, and these products serve 30 million retail customers for the sale. And just a minute ago, I said that Coca-Cola has a history of 137 years, and to live up to another 137 years, we need a sustainable community. And we are very much aware of that fact, and that is why sustainability is the key word for our growth in the future, with 6 different pillars, and most of the original resources are based on water, and we have a keen interest in water management and water reuse, and we target the regions where the water depletion is a serious issue, and also all agricultural ingredients are sourced 100% reusable and sustainable. And we also pursue diversity in people and community, and we want to reflect diverse demands and tastes of our consumers, like low sugar and zero sugar. And what is more important for us is the packaging. Well, packaging accounts for 30% of the emission. So, considering the importance of this area, the circular economy and the sustainable packaging become the key agenda for us. As you can see here, we have set the World Without Initiative, a World Without Waste, which is a daring initiative of Coca-Cola. From the design, production, and reuse and repurpose is the 4 and 5 pillars of the circular strategy, and we want to renew the design to consider the reusability and circulability of the product and materials. And the designed products, once collected, we set the goal with our partners so that we can ensure the completion of the initiatives. And that is why we have partners in 3 different categories. Let me give you some examples. For the design, we have several different goals. As you see here, by 2025, we will make 100% of our packaging recyclable globally. And as of 2022, we achieved a 90% target globally. But if you look at the sustainable report of this year, which has not been produced yet, so all these numbers that I am sharing today are based on 2022 status. And also, by 2030, we will use at least 50% recycled content in our packaging. And as of 2022, 25% has been achieved. But despite these objectives and goals, if we use too much plastic, and this number don't tell any meaning. So by 2022 and 2025, our goal is to reduce 3 million metric tons of virgin plastic. And by 2030, we aim to have at least 25%, which means 1 out of 4 products, 25% of our beverages worldwide by volume sold in refillable and returnable glass or plastic bottles or in filtered dispensers with reusable packaging. And also we will collect these materials. That's one another goal. However, we can't do it alone. If we try to do it alone, and it would take too much time and resource. So that's why we try to be in collaboration with, of course, the government and the academia, and even with the competition. Okay, then let me give you some real-world case studies. As I have just told you, our goal is to use at least 50% of recycled content in our packaging by 2030. And if you look at the RPET, there are different national standards of usage of RPET. So as of 2022, globally, 15% of PET used in recycled PET. And I guess that this number has increased a bit more in European countries, but in Europe currently, 100% of PET used in recycled PET. And the 8 markets in Europe offer their entire locally produced portfolios in 100% RPET. And if you look at the bottom side of the slide, in the North American countries, and this label is engraved bold so that the consumers would notice that this is RPET, and Japan as well. For instance, for the Coke of 350 milliliters, the no-label Coke is sharing the information that is made out of RPET, and we have a good feedback and response from our consumers. And in the NA market, even the bottle cap will also be made with 30% recycled HDPE plastic. So we also won the Innovation Award for the plastic packaging. Well, reusable packaging is a good solution, but one another good solution is to ensure the recycled and reduce the consumption, and also reuse as many times as you can the packaging. And the water use reduction is another good case that we can share. And in Latin America, they have returned, cleansed, and refilled up to 25 times for the reusable packaging. And in Sweden, they have a freestyle dispenser where 60 different fountain beverages can be selected by our consumers, and the consumers can have a customized beverage with carbon volume and in refillable vessels. And in Japan too, in a Universal Studio, for instance, we have this kind of water station where consumers can select one of the 5 beverages that we provide. So up until now, I have talked about sustainable packaging, and sustainable packaging has been a great success thanks to the technological innovation. And even now, Coca-Cola is cooperating with different academia and research institutions so that we can enhance the repackaging or repurpose the packaging. So for instance, it was about 10 years ago that we started the plant bottle use, which has reduced 30% of the use of plastic materials, and we have completed the commercialization of almost 100% use of plant plastic so that we can reduce the carbon footprint. So this IP is open for the access of anybody so that we can reduce the carbon footprint at a global level. And for the bottles under 3 milliliters volume, we can only sell the unibody bottle, which means that you have the unibody of bottle cap and bottle, but we've been in preparation for this before a long time ago, so we have safely landed on the market with this. And if you look at the bundle package in the market, we have this kind of bundle package with tilt clip technology, which uses cardboard. And we have launched this type of new reused plastics. And for the realization of circular economy, collaboration with different sectors is quite important, and also collecting those materials is one another important factor. So in the South America, we have cooperated with a bottler so that we can install a large scale facilities to produce these packaging. And in Japan, we also have partnered with our competition. So as you see here, lots of different stakeholders in the society have been working together so that their plastics can be efficiently used and to be reborn as a rPET bottle. So we have partnered with Suntory in Japan, and for the entire G7 days, we have made this type of commercials, as you see on the screen. And let me now talk about our cases and efforts in Korea. And up to now, I have enumerated some global cases, but in Korea, we were not able to deploy these initiatives according to the limitations of regulatory affairs. However, starting from last year, in collaboration with the Ministry of Environment and also MFDA, we signed an MOU for the rPET application. So the signature product Coca-Cola has used 10% rPET and launched last year. And I told you just before that some foreign countries have already achieved 100% of use of rPET, and you might be wondering why only 10% in Korea. We just started this initiative, and that is why we do not have sufficient infrastructure for this. And we have an issue of stable supply, but we have to try our utmost effort to keep the word to our customers. So considering the brand awareness and the perception of our consumers, we have started from 10% rPET Coca-Cola, and we will increase this percentage. We'll push up the percentage of the reuse of PET. And to have this sustainable, we have made another MOU signing ceremony with Ministry of Environment so that we can launch a no label, zero label bottles. So we have introduced a label-free product, for instance, but when we don't have a brand and it is quite undiscernible from the perspective of customers. However, we have a coconut shaped bottle, which is a signature for Coke. So we have started with Coke bottle, and also for the first time in Korea, we introduced a label-free product of Seagram, as you see, and this design is also expanding its presence to China and to Japan. So all these initiatives and efforts are made to reduce the use of plastics, and we make a variety of efforts. However, the food products or beverage products should consider the safety first. So we have to guarantee the safety as the first priority, and we also try to lightweight these bottles. And for the circular economy, the roles of every stakeholder of the society is quite important. So since 2000, we have been promoting the value of reuse of PET, and with the right approach to circular economy, we can enhance the environmental condition. So that is why we have started our consumer campaigns, which celebrates its 4th edition. So it's called the One the Pull campaign. So this is the campaign for proper recycling education for consumers, and we work with eMart and Silk.com and auction. And up until now, I have talked about the smaller efforts made by our company, but we still know that there's still a long way to go. However, we will attentively listen to the voice of the society. So thank you very much for keeping your attention until the last moment. Thank you.
For your presentation. Since Coca-Cola is a brand we all love dearly, right? So I believe the days come soon when we can fully enjoy the Coca-Cola using 100% reusable packaging. Thank you for your presentation. Moving on to the last presentation in session 1, we have Tae-hee Kim, Director General of Korea Zero Waste Movement Network today. She will talk about efforts of a Korea Zero Waste Movement Network to move forward a free plastic society. Let's invite Director General Tae-hee Kim to the stage. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
안녕하십니까?
Good afternoon. I am Kim Tae-hee from the Korea Zero Waste Movement Network, KZWMN. I feel very honored to be presenting to you today. I am going to talk about the efforts by my group for promoting the Zero Waste Movement Network for a plastic-free society. These are the contents. I will introduce the group KZWMN and talk about the efforts that we have made in collaboration with other domestic environmental organizations to improve policies. And many Korean environmental groups are interested and are making efforts for transitioning to a plastic-free society, which I will also delve into. In addition, it's not something that is taking place in Korea. We also have to work with organizations overseas. So I would also like to outline our collaboration efforts with international environmental groups. The KZWMN was established in 1997, so it's about 27 years old. Unlike other environmental groups, we are a network of different environmental groups. So about 180 environmental groups are in our KZWMN, and we are working towards resource circulation. And our slogan is Zero Waste and 100% Recycling. And not only local civic groups, but businesses and the government are also participating in the resource circulation platform, and that's what we need to build and are working on. So our activities include reducing single-use items and improving packaging materials, reducing food waste, and providing resource circulation education. So we are acting as a resource circulation platform, essentially. First, some of the efforts made by my group and other environmental groups in Korea to improve policies, that's what we will talk about now. First of all, regarding the use of single-use plastic bags, I'm sure you remember in the past when you would go to large supermarkets, you would have to pay 10 won, about 1 cent, to buy a plastic bag. However, in 2009, centered around large discount stores, the use of single-use plastic bags was banned, and also free provision of these plastic bags was prohibited also for 11,000 supermarkets, and now you have to pay for it. The single-use plastic bags drive up plastic usage because they're discarded after just a single use. So in Seoul and other parts of Korea, we have presented these problems and discussed with the government how to eliminate this problem. And that's how we were able to place the ban on single-use plastic bags in 2019. Next, the Environmental Ministry person also spoke about this improvement of recycling standards. Koreans may have traditionally believed that the bigger the better when it comes to packaging. So the packaging tends to be very glamorous and elaborate and big. So not just for plastic packaging, but for paper packaging as well. The packaging materials are wasted significantly, and statistically, about 30% of the household waste comes from packaging materials. Those are the statistic findings. Not just that, but in the past, businesses focus more on marketing. So rather than the recyclability of the packaging materials, they focus more on presenting pretty materials that stand out. But with these regulations, I believe that the perception has changed and improved a lot, and more efforts are taking place to improve packaging material recyclability. And environmental groups have insisted for a long time that there is an issue with these elaborate packaging materials, and have continuously proposed policies to the government. And in 2019, we were able to improve the recycling standards for the packaging materials, including PET bottles. Next, the repackaging ban law was enacted in 2021. If you look on the left side, you see in the past when you bought milk, 2 cartons of milk, they were packaged together in a plastic bag. But with the enactment of the repackaging ban law in 2021, this packaging material has been eliminated. Usually, you would see some paper straps or small tape applied to put the 2 items together. So there have been a lot of efforts taking place to eliminate and reduce plastic packaging materials. Next, we have been doing this for a while. Fast food restaurants or coffee places in Korea used to allow single-use materials within the stores as well. So in order to proactively reduce the use of single-use plastic straws and other items, we have proposed the need for efforts to reduce single-use materials at coffee shops and fast food chains. So in 2013, for the first time, we were able to sign a voluntary agreement to reduce single-use items within stores and try to make maximum efforts to recycle the single-use materials used in stores. We have done this 3 times, the voluntary agreement 3 times. And in January 2024, we have signed an agreement with 24 fast food chains, coffee shop chains, and bakery chains to expand the use of reusable cups and also provide incentives to customers who would bring in their own tumblers and cups. So they are making voluntary efforts to reduce the use of single-use materials. And in the first half of this year, we did some monitoring for these 24 chains. The newly signed chains may have some areas, we have found some areas of improvement. However, the older members were showing vast improvements. Secondly, with the environmental groups in Korea, we have worked together for a nationwide effort to promote resource circulation. Even prior to 2020, our member groups have promoted building resource circulation villages. We have 180 groups working together, and with various groups within our network, we have been promoting recycling and wise collection of waste, and also reduction of waste. So in accordance with the characteristics of local communities, we have been thinking about different ways to reduce plastic and build a circular economy nationwide. This is a high-level picture of what we have been doing. You may feel that, oh, this is something that we are already doing. Why are you showing these pictures? You may think that. However, as for this year in Gyeonggi Province or in Seoul, there are some festivals conducted by local governments to conduct festivals without plastic or single-use materials. But we have been working on this for a very long time. And in Gangwon Province and Chungcheong Province, we have also promoted festivals without single-use items. And many younger generations are showing more interest in shopping at stores without packaging. In 2018, for the first time, we proposed the operation of a store without packaging. And in regional communities besides Seoul, these stores were not really popular. However, we made efforts to spread them to outside of Seoul. So getting rid of the packaging materials from products and selling them at these stores. And we have made efforts to open and operate these stores. And another thing that I want to highlight is the delivery system using reusable containers. We have tried this. There are a lot of early morning deliveries, and they are usually delivered in plastic packaging or plastic bags. But centering around a chain of grocery stores, we have established a delivery system using reusable containers. So from civic group standpoint, we have made a diverse range of efforts for creating plastic-free communities. And the single-use umbrella covers have been designated as single-use items, and they are banned from large supermarkets. And in 2015, for the first time, we talked to public institutions in Seoul about how to reduce single-use umbrella covers. When we first tried it, public institutions had some doubts about its success, and they found it very challenging when we first implemented it. However, this movement has been spread a lot, and the relevant law has also been enacted, and I believe that this was a very successful effort. So this was able to be spread nationwide because of the collaboration with corporations. In 2018, we worked with Starbucks nationwide to eliminate single-use umbrella covers, and Starbucks established the eco-friendly wet umbrella dryers, and this spread throughout the country and has led to the current success. Now we're working with Starbucks too. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but there is a every 10th of the month is designated as a plastic-free day. So we started in 2018, and at first, in order to reduce the use of single-use plastic cups, there was a movement to encourage the use of multi-use plastic cups. So if they use multi-use cups, then maybe they were given a freebie. However, nowadays, the use of multi-use cups has been established somewhat. However, the biggest problem now is the take-out single-use plastic cups. So if people bring in their own tumblers, then the consumers can get incentives, and that's the direction that we're now heading in. Next, so these are the efforts that we have made in Korea. But for deplasticization, we also need to work with international environmental groups. So we have been working with them from early 2000s. We have been working with Gaia, Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, over 90 countries. And 1,000 organizations are part of Gaia. So for over 2 decades, we have been working with Gaia, and recently we collaborated in the INC3. So this was an agreement to reduce virgin plastic production by over 80% by 2024 and subsidies for the petrochemical industry and ban toxic additives that hinder circular resources. These were the topics that we have been working on together with Gaia. And internationally, there is this commemoration day, and we try to adopt these commemorative days in Korea. First, there's an International Day of Zero Waste. UN has proclaimed March 30th as the International Day of Zero Waste, and this happened in 2023, and we wanted to be in line with the international efforts. And this year, we conducted a campaign to raise awareness of the Day of Zero Waste in Korea. And one of the biggest efforts that we have made with international groups is that we are pretty advanced in terms of environmental efforts compared to other countries in the world. And other countries also want to hear about best practices from Korea. So when working with international groups, we share some achievements of Korea's resource circulation efforts. For example, reduction of single-use plastic cups. We have made some great achievements, and also in other policy areas too. So we like to share these cases with other civic organizations of other countries. And the civic organizations of other countries, as they learn about the best practices of Korea, they would like to find out more about the best practices in Korea, so they come to us. So we have held some meetings with the governments of other countries to share these policies so that they can be adopted overseas and spread throughout the world. This is a case of failure. However, in Japan, they probably like the policy of banning single-use plastic cups in stores. So there was a suggestion made to Starbucks in Japan. It didn't last long, but the Japanese Starbucks stores also temporarily banned single-use plastic cups in stores. So Korean policies can be adopted overseas and have been implemented, actually. And although it didn't really work in Korea, you know, the brown beer bottles, they are still in use in Korea. And Japan also tried to commercialize the brown beer bottles. However, some civic groups protested and objected to the adoption, so it wasn't adopted in Japan because they were not recyclable. So that has happened. Moreover, there are other regional meetings that we partake in. Next slide, please. Next, please. Yeah, and the International Plastic Free Day, International Plastic Bag Free Day, which is July 3rd. I'm sure you've heard about it. And we have been promoting this since 2008. So it's a day where we don't use plastic. We have participated in this campaign since 2009, and we have worked with Seoul City to promote this. And I'm sure a lot of Koreans also know about this campaign now. So we try to promote these international commemorative days in Korea as well. Next slide, please. And we are also cooperating with BFFP, Break Free from Plastic movement. This involves reducing the single-use plastic and finding solution to the plastic pollution crisis. And these are pretty similar plastic-free movements through cooperation with other international groups. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing your expertise. As the largest resource circulation cooperation organization in the country, we were able to learn about its activities towards green growth in Korea, including efforts to create a resource circulation culture platform and also develop resource circulation policies. Thank you for your presentation. And now we will have a panel discussion and a Q&A session. So let me first introduce who will be invited on the stage for the discussion. So today we are honored to have Professor Ju-young Park, but the stage is ready. We will invite you on the stage. And Ju-young Park, the professor from the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Seoul National University, is our chair today. And the panelists for the Q&A session for the first session are First Secretary Min Sung-seo and Officer Jae-kyung Lee, and Head Eun-ah Kim, Vice President Chang Hyu-choi, Director Jin-young Lee, and Director General Tae-hee Kim. Seems like the stage is ready, so we will invite the Professor Ju-young Park and our panelist speakers of session 1 onto the stage. Please come up to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome them with a big round of applause. So after the discussion, if anyone has questions, please raise your hands. Our staff will deliver and pass the microphone to you. So Professor, are you ready? Yes. The stage is yours.
네, 소개 감사드립니다. 방금
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Park Ju-young from Seoul National University, and this is a great pleasure for me to be invited to this meaningful event. Plastic circular economy has earning the key interest from the global community, and as we just have listened to different presentations of speakers, we can tell that there is a swift and quick changes in the corner of the world. And thanks once again for the insightful presentations. And plastic circular economy needs different collaborations from different perspectives. That is why we have a variety of profiles of our speakers from the academia, from the government, and from the private sector and NGO. This is a rare chance to have these panelists together, so we do not have enough time for the Q&A. However, I would like to have a general discussion session between panelists at the end. But before that, would like to receive some questions freely from the floor. When you have a question, please raise your hand.
네, 안녕하세요. 전 동아
Good afternoon. My name is Lee Eun-ah, Head of International Relations of the Ocean, which relates to the East Asian Ocean Protection. Ocean is the only private research institute, and we are registered to the UN, and we are the only institute which studies about the ocean protection. And the UNEA 5-14 resolution has been the locomotive for us to continue our activities. Well, this kind of platform has been much needed by our Institute, and thank you very much for the opportunity. We thought that this was quite important because we wanted to recognize the gap of perspective and thoughts of different parties. In that sense, it was quite useful for me. Well, I have a question to Ms. Lee from National Assembly, and then Mr. Choi Chang-hyu from Lotte Chemical.
So close the tight and turn off the faucet is frequently mentioned, as you said, and these slogans seem to represent the de-plastic movement. And as these slogans are promoted, sometimes the meaning is distorted and misunderstood. There is a UN report which said turn off the faucet and turn off the tablet, which first mentioned the reduction of production, because that has to come first. But in your presentation, you said the discussion, there is a greater discussion on the production reduction, and in the downstream side, for private sectors to develop business models, you said more support is needed. However, what I understand is to be the complete opposite. As you could see in the presentation materials, recycling downstream is the only area that we are focusing on, it seems. So in a way, in the negotiation process, it may sound like you're only talking about reducing production on the upstream side. However, for the downstream side, when you're building a market, you have to confirm the potential for a new market, and there has been some progress made by the private sector. So ISO is also making efforts to build international standards. I'm sure systematic support is needed. However, in your view from the Innovative Growth Group of the National Assembly Future Institute, I believe that you should present a more realistic perspective. And for Mr. Choi from Lotte Chemical, I don't represent everyone, but since I work for a civic group in Korea, I also work with a lot of different communities overseas and in Korea, and to share our opinions. You compare the single-use plastic, wooden chopsticks to plastic. However, plastic was first invented in order to reduce the use of wood, but such argument doesn't work anymore. That's what I wanted to tell you. And already in Korea, you are I'm sure you're familiar with the inability to treat all the waste generated from Korea. So landfill, and in terms of pyrolysis, we're not responding well because the sheer amount of waste generated is magnificent. So we need to work more on production reduction. If we just end our discussion with the talk about recycling only, then I feel that we would not be going in the right direction. That's why I am asking these questions. Yeah, thank you so much for the questions.
Thank you very much for the question. Well, I think there has been a misunderstanding of our research methodology, but we tried to reveal the important aspects that has been discarded or neglected by the stakeholders. Before, the policy focus was more on waste management, as you just said, how to collect and reuse and recycle those wastes was the focus of the policy. However, there has been a common recognition that that was not enough, and that's why we try to incentivize the producer. And just a while ago, we have enacted the Promotional Act for Plastic Circular Economy by highlighting the important role of producer. And now, producers think that there are opportunities thanks to this political approach. And as this kind of approach of incentivizing producer has been a novelty, that we can see that there is a diverted direction. Well, as you just have pointed out that there is a close the gap and turning off the tablet. Well, this kind of approach, it seems to be the foundational solution to you. And ideally, that is right. I feel for you. However, considering the reality, would it be the optimal solution? That is my question. What kind of actions can we make at a practical level? That could be another question that we could ask ourselves. And in that regard, I assume that at the level of consumption already, we could play diverse roles. And it seems to me that we do not put much focus and interest in this area of the role of consumers. And we only highlight the two ends of the cycle, I mean, the producer and consumer, but I wanted to shift the focus of the perspectives from those two ends. I hope this does.
Mr. Choi, can you answer the question? Yeah, frankly speaking, you do have a very different perspective from mine. I don't think it's an easy feat to reduce the total production amount of plastic from a global perspective as well. As the ambassador said, maybe we can boldly reduce unnecessary packaging materials. However, reducing the net production of plastic cannot be so easy. The new commitment by UNEP, and there are different commitments which have set out 5 goals, and 2 of them are reducing the use of plastic, and the other one is to increase the amount of recycling. Reducing the use of plastic, we have committed to, for example, 10%, 15% reduction by business. However, plastic use is actually increasing. But on the other hand, virtual circulation of resources, recycling, is increasing. So plastic waste is an issue and CO2 emissions are an issue. However, if we do a better job recycling and build a better system for recycling, then the waste generation would also be reduced and CO2 emissions would be reduced naturally. So our perspective and perception is that we can reduce the plastic pollution problem that way. So that's what I want to talk about. The wooden chopsticks was just an example. I do admit that it was a wrong example. However, if you look up eco-friendly in the dictionary, it says you shouldn't produce impact on the environment. So as we try to reduce the use of plastic, we can turn our attention to if we try to use excessive natural resources such as metal or wood, then I don't think that's environmentally friendly. This is some area that we need to continue to think about and discuss. So at the 3rd and 4th INC, there has been an argument and objection about the reduction of plastic materials. That's what I heard. I hope that there could be more time where we can discuss these issues in more detail. Thank you. Yeah, these are hot agendas also. To what extent do we need to reduce consumption? That's not an easy answer, easy question to answer. We are conducting some studies to study how much plastic is being used, and the plastic used by individual in Korea is about 135 kilograms in Korea, which is a lot larger compared to 110 or 70 in Europe or Japan. So excessive consumption should be reduced, but to what extent is it excessive? That also has to be discussed. And the second question? The person who wanted to ask a question after her.
Thank you. My name is Nabil Munir. I'm the ambassador of Pakistan here. First of all, thank you to MOFA and GGGI for arranging this. I have a couple of questions. The first one is from First Secretary CEO. That's about the INC 5. You yourself mentioned, First Secretary CEO, that it's going to be a challenging proposition to conclude. What, in your view, are like 2 or 3 main issues that will, in the end, become kind of the main make or break issue in Busan. And my second question is from Ms. Lee from Coca-Cola Company. When I was in the school, and that was of course a very, very long time ago, it was we used to have these glass bottles, and there was a small deposit that you used to pay, and then we used to, those bottles were used for like years and years. Is that still a possibility? Is that a viable option? I mean, reducing plastics is one thing, but also using other alternatives in addition to plastics, or like the bottles, glass bottles. Is that something that is still possible, and is that something that your company like Coca-Cola is still thinking about? Thank you.
저 먼저 답변.
Okay, let me address your question first. Thank you very much, His Excellency Ambassador. Well, I also attended INC4 in person, and I still remember that it was really hard to get to an agreement between different parties. On the last day, our discussion has lasted until 3 a.m., and we barely were able to conclude the intergovernmental theme for the next discussion, and I was able to feel that how hard it was to get a consensus from different parties, from different governments. And as you have just pointed out, the main agenda or main challenging issues for INC 5, to come with the answer, we have to reflect on INC 4, where plastic polymer and chemical and plastics of concerns were discussed for the contact group 1, and the contact group 2 has discussed the funding and the implementation. And if you compare these two, contact group 1 that has discussed polymer and the substances of concerns, that contact group 1 had seen a more diverted ideas and opinions, and it took longer for them to have a conclusion. So I guess an identical situation will arise for INC 5 to determine the different level of regulations at different levels of countries and also the global communities. That is my expectation. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Lee, please. Well, pertaining to glass bottle, I feel for you with your idea of using glass bottles. If used well, yes, there are lots of environmental benefits. Well, I do not need to enumerate the different benefits of using glass bottles, I guess. But in case of Coca-Cola, we sell product to consumers. So we have to reflect the perspectives of consumers as one of the priorities. Well, when we try to introduce a new product, we try different types of packaging. But when it comes to glass bottle, there is a benefit for environment, but we also have issues for safety for our consumers. Well, from outsiders' view, it might sound that glass bottles we are using more dangerous substances like glass bottles that could break easily. And also, glass bottles need a space for storage, and it's heavier than plastic. And when it's hot outside, it could explode when it is moved from outside into inside because of the temperature difference. And recently, in restaurant and home eco area, we received some negative feedbacks about these inconveniences from the owners of restaurants and hotels, for instance. And we've been considering a lot about resolving these issues. So, as you have just suggested, Ambassador, despite of all these inconveniences and difficulties, considering the importance of environment in European countries, they try to find out new channels where glass bottles could be easily used. And we too, internally in Korea, we also try to find out solutions on how to apply more glass bottles to the market. I hope my answer is enough for your question. Thank you. Thank you very much for the answer. Time's almost up, but we still have a question from the floor.
받도록 하겠습니다.
So I'll take the last question from the floor.
My name is Cesar Padilla. I represent Honduran Embassy here at South Korea, and I'm Counselor for Trade and Economic Affairs. My question is directed for Jochen Lee. Since some facilities and infrastructure are not as developed or advanced as wealthier nations, could you provide some examples of how countries will track or moderate progress in this? And could you also relate on the idea provided of how technology transfer can support the development of a global circular economy?
So to confirm, is your question directed to Tae-kyung Lee or Euna Kim?
Oh, I wasn't sure if the question was directed at me. I only caught the last part, which technology can be transferred. First, currently, many people are interested in plastic circularity, and if you look at the technologies involved in this area, recycling and using them as resources, again, through recycling. Technology transfer in these areas, why can't it take place as well as it should? It's because the technology is not as high tech in developing countries. However, I believe that shouldn't be the end. I believe such technology is not in the emerging phase anymore, and if more opportunities can be found in data science or AI fields, if they can be used together for automated sorting or plastic waste that was not recycled into other resources can be recycled through chemical recycling or physical recycling. There are many studies conducted in these areas, and also bioplastic, biodegradable plastic, or bio-based plastic. I'm sure that they pose a lot of opportunities too, and hopefully such technologies can be transferred to developing countries. What about the first part of the question? I kind of missed it. Can you repeat that again?
Yes. Yes, the first part is since our countries do not have a developed infrastructure and facilities to treat and even identify these waste management in plastics situation, which type of example could you provide, or how can we track and moderate progress in that matter?
네, 좋은 질문이십니다. 이게 어떻게 보면은 그냥
That's a great question. It's not just a single technology pertaining to circular economy, but waste management has already been implemented, and the circular material flow is already enabled. That has to be enabled for a circular economy to be established. So the waste management for that has to be founded first as a foundation for us to take the next steps. Thank you so much. I said that was the last question, but someone had a burning question, so it's really the last question now.
Good afternoon. I am the 13th alumni group of EcoTrend team from Ministry of Foreign Affairs Global Growth Challenge. Well, as said earlier, diverse parties' collaboration is needed for the plastic circular economy in the long term. So the youth of the future will be the major actors to deal with this issue in the end. So in that sense, what kind of cooperation is being implemented by the government and by the academia and private sector? And I would like to direct these questions to the speaker from the ministry and also from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Environment. So I would like to listen to you about the efforts made. Well, first of all, if you look at the statements or the content of the treaty, it shows the consideration of the vulnerable group, including the women and other stakeholders. And this clause is included for the time being. And how to make an engagement from different stakeholders is under discussion because the text has not been finalized by the parties. So our imminent task is to draw a consensus on this. And as you have seen from the climate change COP meetings, so we have to continue our meetings to deliver the ways to cooperate together through COP-like meetings. Okay, my answer is almost identical to Mr. Saw. We are now editing the draft. So the engagement of stakeholders will be dealt once again at an implementation stage. But many observers and the youth institutions, they engaged very actively as observers on site. Thank you. Well, it is true that Mr. Kim has been working really hard with the youth. So would you like to say your concluding words here? Well, our institution is working actively with the students from elementary, middle, and high schools. And we do educational activities to these students because we didn't have much interest in circular economy. However, with time passing by, there are lots of requests for the education about the circular economy, not only from schools, but from directly students. That's how we make more engagement of those people. And not only our institute, but also other relevant institutes and active parties, they hold a kind of competition and concourse for the students to get ideas. And we receive many different ideas and suggestions from schoolers' perspectives. So not only adolescents, but also university students are our potential partners to work with, and we would like to expand the scope of cooperation with them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your participation for a long time. Thank you.
Your active participation and attention. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause to our chairman and also panelists who shared their brilliant insights. Thank you very much, and you may step down from the stage now. All right, and this brings us to the end of session 1, and now we will take a short break until 4:35. Once again, we will take a break until 4:35, which is a kind of a short break. And also, we have prepared some traditional Korean snacks and coffee and some tea at the back of this hall. So please feel free to enjoy them during the break, and we'll be back soon. Attention, please, ladies and gentlemen. Resume the second session of the 11th Green Roundtable in a moment. So, all the participants, attendees, please get into the room and be seated. Thank you for your cooperation. Once again, we'll be resuming the second session of the 11th Green Roundtable. So please get into the room and be seated. Thank you. May I have your attention, please, ladies and gentlemen? We will begin the second session of the 11th Green Roundtable in 1 minute. So all the attendees, please get into the room and be seated. 안내 말씀드리겠습니다.
In a minute, we'll start the second session of the 11th Green Roundtable. If you are still in the lobby, please come inside and take a seat. Thank you.
All right, it seems like we are ready for the next session. So did you enjoy your break? Hope you are having a fruitful time so far. So now let's begin session 2 of the 11th Green Roundtable on how to finance the future convention on plastic pollution. The first presentation in session 2 will be delivered by Yumi Jung, Policy Advisor, Korea Environmental Industry and Technology Institute, on the topic of a global environment facility, potential financial mechanism for plastics treaty. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests. Today, I saw a lot of Korean people from the audience. I would like to speak in Korean for my presentation. 안녕하세요. 제 이름은
Good afternoon. My name is Jung Yoo-mi. and I work at the Korea Environmental Industry and Technology Institute, and I'm in charge of bilateral meetings and product-related meetings. So today, concerning the plastic treaty, I would like to talk about the Global Environment Facility, GEF, which is discussed as the potential financial mechanism for plastics treaty. So first, I would like to introduce GEF, and that will be followed by the question, why the GEF so important? And the third part of this presentation will be about finding out a meaning of GEF as the financial mechanism for plastics treaty, and what kind of big issues for developing countries exist, and what kind of stance Korean government should take. And these questions will be addressed with my personal thoughts. First, let me briefly introduce what GEF is. GEF is the largest environmental multi-donor trust fund. This fund was made firstly in 1992 at the occasion of Rio Convention, and it has many different funding sources, and we have formed 8 different fundings to reach 25 billion US dollars up to now. And you may be curious to know the scale of each project. So recently, we have developed a project accounting for around 200 billion, and the average is around 10 billion, and the mid-size is around 5.2 billion. And recently, mid-size and large-scale projects are divided at the ceiling of 5 million US dollars, which has increased from $2 million, which means that the scale of GEF-related project has been increasing in terms of its scale and size. And this shows how much interest is given by the developed and developing countries. And GEF is explained as financial mechanism of 5 international environmental conventions. Unlike GCF of UNFCCC, GEF supports 5 different conventions such as UNFCCC and CBD and UNCCD, Stockholm Convention, and Minamata Convention. And this was finalized last year. So, Biodiversity National Jurisdiction, UN Convention on BBNJ was signed last year, and it is under ratification by each stakeholder nation. And once this convention on BBNJ is enacted, and then GEF has already decided to support the BBNJ as well in the future. And in the maritime area, GEF is making different steps for the support of developing countries for the BBNJ in the area of water. So GEF supports 5 conventions with 5 focal areas of climate change, biodiversity, land degradation, international waters, and chemicals. And the governance of GEF is as follows, as you see on the screen on the bottom side. GEF is composed of assembly and 5 different conventions, and the collected idea of these 2 guidance instruments will be transferred to 32 constituencies, and the directors selected and elected by these 32 constituencies work for the council, and the real operation is made by the secretariat, and actions are delivered by 185 member governments. At first, the beneficiaries and each participating member conducted their respective projects, And there are agencies of Jeff, and they play a very similar role to GCF certified organizations. They design a project and develop a project, and once this project is approved by Jeff, then Jeff injects the fund into beneficiary governments. And these countries do not conduct the project themselves. However, these countries monitor the project and its implementation, and the progress report will be reported to the Secretariat. So, the executing entities are belonging to the member governments, and it could be a government institution, a private sector. And this is how the governance is composed for Jeff. So Jeff itself, as said earlier, is centered around trust fund. However, for LDCF, SCCF, and CBIT and GBFF, and these trust funds are operated respectively and separately, and Jeff is the largest scale fund, and Jeff ensures a stable operation of the fund. And the 4-year replenishment cycle is the characteristic of Jeff, and the current Jeff 8 fund is for the period of 2022 to 2026, and 5.3 billion US dollars are pledged by 39 donor nations, which is a relatively small scale in terms of the total amount, because the previous amounts of up until Jeff 7 were a bit smaller funding composition, because it only deals with Jeff replenishment cycles. And this is the overview briefing of Jeff. Then let me now explain why the Jeff is so important in terms of environmental funding method. Well, if you look at the developing countries, they prefer grant, because the lending is considered to be a debt for the government. So that is why developing countries prefer a smaller scale of fund like Jeff, because Jeff provides 98% of its spending as grant. And compared to GCF, Jeff has more number of member countries, which is 186. It is said earlier, Jeff has a high co-financing ratio. Well, if you look at other horizontal relationship-based funds of the environment industry, Jeff highlights the importance of co-financing, and depending on the ratio of co-financing, the goal is set differently, so that entities and executing entities could meet their targets and goals. So the ratio is quite high. As said earlier, it's about 1:7, and their scales of projects are a lot bigger than other projects of the environment area. And as you see here, LDCF, SCCF, and we have other trust funds. And last year we newly had a GBFF, and the BB&J funds will be accommodated very soon. So the fund is expected to be expanded in the future too, and we have other funds to come further in the future. But other than the scale and the trend, there are different benefits of Jeff compared to the GCF. GCF is the most well-known fund in Korea. Well, when it comes to GCF, it supports UNFCCC. That is why it only deals with climate change. But Jeff, other than climate change, covers land, water, chemicals, and biodiversity, and it covers 5 different sectors altogether. So we always talk about the three main factors of climate change for the planet. So that's why we try to make a synergetic effect of different areas. And when we talk about this synergetic effect, people prioritize 5 sectors of GEF, and they try to find out the synergetic effects between these 5 sectors of GEF so that they can create the sustainability of different activities. Then one of it is to run an integrated program, which is called IP. So integrated programs will touch upon the climate change, biodiversity, and land deforestation, and they try to make a synergetic effect between these 3 different areas, and the ratio of combining these 3 main elements is increasing. And one another note to share is that GEF has already a history of 30 years, and GEF supports 5 different conventions, and it also follows up the different trend and evolution of these 5 conventions, and it tries to adopt and accept and adapt to the different trend of 5 conventions, and this is one another strength of GEF. So last but not least, we are here to talk about plastics treaty. Then you might be wondering why I am talking about GEF. And also you may be curious to know if GEF is an appropriate financial mechanism for plastics treaty. And this is my simple thought to that question. Well, I have made a comparison between new mechanism against GEF. Well, from the view of Korea, what kind of aspects should be considered, and how should we approach to the convention negotiation table? So I have summed up in 3 main factors. First, developing countries which need a traditional or a new mechanism for financing. Well, developing countries would like to establish a new mechanism for a certain area. Then why is the need formed so? Because they may expect that they could receive a lot more funds if they have newly formed funds from developing countries, developed countries, and other international organizations, and I came up with a meaningful stats. Well, out of all the global environment funds, multi-donor funds represent a very small portion. For instance, if you look at the composition of different types of funds, let me put it this way, okay? Well, let me quote a specific stat. Climate Policy Initiative, according to it, as of 2021, the scale of Global Environment Fund accounted for 1,270 billion US dollars, and public fund was around 640,000, and multi-donor 100 billion, and bilateral was 115 billion US dollars. And also we have GCF, GF, CIF, AF as a horizontal fund, and between 21 to 22, they accounted for around 3% of total concession of finance to emerging and developing economies and LDCs. So in a nutshell, in general, this kind of mechanism for financing shows a very low ratio for the developing countries. So even if we increase the total scale, I mean the total amount of funding scale, that does not suffice for the needs and requests of developing countries. So this is something that we have to consider more about. And if we create a newly formed fund, then would it increase the voice of developing countries? Would it be more convenient to developing countries to be injected with new funds I'm afraid not, because major decisions are made by Council, and it is highly probable that the opinions of donor countries will be mainly reflected, and also these donor countries would not say that would not allow a complete discretion of use of the fund by developing countries. So they always give us a guidance to focus on their preferable areas. And that is why, even with a newly formed fund, it would not go as expected or wished by developing countries. In that case, the new financial mechanism, you may be wondering if a new financial mechanism can be formed easily. And again, I'm afraid not, because it needs extra time, financial, and human resources. And Jeff has been under operation in a stable manner after a long deliberation and negotiation, and that is why I would like to pose these three questions to the process of making a new financial mechanism by tapping into different sectors and different pros and cons for developing countries, because it needs more time and effort. And we also have to think that if it is really necessary and if it could be used as expected for the developing countries. For instance, the newly formed fund last year is not still used for the developing countries. Well, the funding is complete. However, the operating entity has not been finalized, so it is deposited into the bank account. And as for the GBBF, the COP has finally made a consensus, and they designated Jeff as an operating fund, and the support for developing countries has only started last year. So in this sense, to expedite the support with a new mechanism, funding mechanism, we cannot be solely dependent on the creation of new mechanism. It'll be better for us to designate a stable and previously formed funding mechanism for developing countries where they can request an urgent area. And despite of all these circumstances, it is quite limited that I show the necessary documents and reports. So we will have to think what kind of new financial mechanisms will be necessary for the developing countries, and we need a platform for the discussion. Thank you.
And it was a time to understand what the means of JEF and also the role it plays in the context of a potential financial mechanism for plastics treaty. All right, next, our second and last presentation of the second session. We will have Jin Young-moon on the stage, Research Fellow, Korea Institute for International Economic Policy. He will be presenting on global mobilization and perspectives of climate finance. Now, we have him here on the stage. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Considering the major audience of this roundtable, let me speak in Korean. 안녕하세요. 저는 대외경제정책연구원의 문진.
Hi, I am Jin Young-moon, and I feel very honored to be presenting on the topic that I prepared. And considering the time constraints, I would like to briefly talk about the efforts made for climate finance globally. Today's conference is about responding to plastic pollution, and I can also talk about how the global climate finance can play a role in addressing plastic pollution. And we are holding the INC5 in Busan this year, and also the Ministry of Environment has successfully won the right to host the next year's conference. And many efforts are being made by the Korean government and also other companies in Korea. So how can we talk about climate finance, not just in terms of plastic pollution or biodiversity, but the discussion mechanism globally is pretty similar. There's a common task that we all need to tackle together. Who's going to do what? It all comes down to that question. So that question has to be answered. I have joined the QFA for climate change, and I'm following up on these relevant issues. And to discuss the INC 5 schedule for this year, the NCGQ, implementing it is the biggest task that we're facing. So how are we going to tackle it is the issue that we need to discuss. And for another agenda item, we were talking about plastic pollution. We need to build a house, essentially. So some parties want to build a nice home, and other parties are talking about how to build that home since we don't have one already. So that's why these discussions are taking place simultaneously. So why is tackling climate change important? Advanced countries have been emitting greenhouse gases. However, with the changing global environment, the emissions are now coming from developing countries as well. So that's why a global response is needed. So we have committed to stabilizing the greenhouse gas concentration level in the atmosphere, and the efforts are still lacking to limit global warming. And we are continually talking about implementation measures. We need first money and technology and the capacities to address these issues. And tackling these three issues is key. And first, the financial support or financing is important because you need to talk about how to get money in order to address these issues. Where is the money coming from? Who's going to pay for it? So the subject of who is going to pay for it is the issue here. Comparable to the plastic treaty, in 1992, the global UNFCCC was established, and as for its goal, I'm sure you all know, it's to stabilize the greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. And so what is the specific goal for this? What are the principles in order to achieve this objective? And there was a different perspective and gap in perspective between advanced countries and developing countries. So the principles states that it should be common but differentiated responsibilities. So advanced countries insist on making common efforts. However, for developing countries, they focus more on differentiated responsibilities. So in Article 4, the developed countries have a bigger commitment to reducing emissions, and that's why these annexes have come about. And as for separate commitments, there is a section that addresses the financial support. Developing countries always talk about predictable, additional, adequate, because they need new and additional clear financial support and predictable financial support, and that's what they emphasize. In that perspective, a financial mechanism is necessary, and which was built under Article 11 of UNFCCC, which says that the advanced countries should provide financial support through multilateral, bilateral, and regional and other channels. But the operation of the financial mechanism has been arbitrarily designated to be the GEF. And there has been a lot of talks about having to build more support and finance. So there is GEF, GCF, and about $1 billion, $2 billion was the amount that has been generated. So that's why we are constantly hearing complaints from developing countries, and the existing mechanism and the existing financing is insufficient. So a fund specialized for responding to climate change is necessary, and the advanced countries need to provide that fund is the arguments made by developing countries. So at COP16 in Cancun, they committed to a goal of mobilizing jointly $100 billion per year by 2020, and that happened in 2010. So in that context, as an operating entity of the green finance, the operating entity has been designated as GCF, and we were able to be the secretariat for this. And a new body is needed. So that's why a standing committee on finance was established to assist the COP for important agendas to be discussed at COP. And discussions on how the fund is supported and mobilized is discussed here, take place here. And after 2020, a new climate system was built. And the biggest issue here was who is going to pay how much and where is that fund going? So it starts from who. The most difficult issue here was should the fund only come from developed countries or developed countries plus other countries? Under the UNFCCC, Korea is still designated as developing country. And under the Paris Agreement, under the UNFCCC, advanced countries do have the responsibility to mobilize climate finance. However, other countries can voluntarily finance the green initiatives too. So Korea would qualify as the other party under the Paris Agreement, but Korea is committed to being accountable for this green finance mobilization. And how are we going to do it transparently? And how are we going to provide predictable information qualitatively and quantitatively to developing countries? And that was a request from the developing countries to get predictable information in advance. And beyond the public finance, when there's more public intervention, how much more private finance can be mobilized? Those were the questions that we needed to answer. And so advanced countries are mandatorily obliged to provide these finances, and the developing countries or other countries can voluntarily contribute. If you look at this diagram, biannually, the Standing Committee publishes a report on the climate finance flow. So globally, where is climate finance being generated? And how much are developed countries providing to developing countries is published here. And you can see the darker areas and the lighter areas. So to what extent are we going to include different areas for climate finance? So what qualifies as climate finance? There may be some gray areas. So gray areas are colored lightly. Globally, there is about $800 billion that is being talked about, but not too much fund is going from developed countries to developing countries. And there are largely three channels. On the left side, you see the fund going from developed countries to developing countries. So maybe through ODA, the assistance can go to developing countries, and also multilateral funds or bilateral funds can also go to these developing countries through multilateral channels, or through in the process of the assistance going from developed countries to developing countries, private finance can also be mobilized. However, prior to the INC 5, developed countries have finally achieved the promise to mobilize $100 billion. as they promised in 2020, and there has been some controversy over the belatedness of the achievement. And is it really climate finance? That's also another question that was proposed. And another issue is in the process of signing the Paris Agreement, NCQG, they committed, in the annex it said the NCGQ would be implemented by 2050, 2025. However, the discussion has to be completed by the end of 2024, and that's why negotiations are taking place this year to conclude these discussions. So, and what items are we going to include in NCGQ? So who's going to pay how much? That's the question again. And now it's not in the $1 billion anymore. We're talking about $1 trillion. How are we going to secure that amount of money from where? So that's the question that it all boils down to. So this is a very difficult question. There are doubts about whether these agreements will be made by the end of this year, as there was a global doubt and concern about Brexit in the past. And we do already have a 6-page long report which says that a mechanism has to be built, and under the mechanism, are we going to build a fund under the mechanism, or are we going to build a separate fund, or are we going to operate the fund under the mechanism? So we will build a certain mechanism, but are we going to take an easier route? So by easy, I mean, are we going to utilize the existing process, or are we going to create an entirely new process? So that's the question that we need to answer. And the perspectives of people who are funding and people who are receiving the fund would be different. The advanced countries always say that you have to use the fund for meaningful mitigation and transparent efforts. They are not just giving out the money blindly. They are asking the recipients to commit to a certain promise to improve the situation. However, developing countries do not like this. And why do we need to be responsible for reducing carbon gases, carbon emissions, when you are the ones who have been responsible so far? So that's always the controversy and a difference in opinion between the two parties. Korea has been playing a big role in the international community. And we have also committed to paying, giving out funds for the loss and contribution funds. And we have been made a lot of commitment to. Even so, how can we promote our efforts in the global community and contribute more to these efforts? And meanwhile, how can we secure our national interest? We are always thinking about how to answer these questions when we think of climate finance. Thank you for listening.
And for your informative presentation, he has talked about global mobilization and perspectives of climate finance. It was a valuable presentation also that provided insights into the global mobilization of climate finance and its future prospects. Now we will have a panel discussion and Q&A session. Also, if when the stage is ready, we will invite the moderator, Professor Park, and also our speakers of the session 2. And the session 2 covered the theme of how to finance the future convention on plastic pollution. And the policy advisor, Ms. Yu-Mi Jung, and talked about Jeff as a potential financial mechanism for plastics treaty. And right after her presentation, research fellow Mr. Jin Young-moon, he also delivered a presentation on perspectives of climate finance. Right, seems like we are ready for the discussion. So I would like to invite the moderator, Professor Park, again onto the stage and our speakers of session 2. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome them with a big round of applause. Professor Park, let me hand over the microphone to you.
네, 감사합니다. 이번 세션
Thank you very much. During this session, we are discussing different methods of financing for the future convention of plastic pollution. And especially when discussing the plastics treaty of UNEP, there has been diverse opinions between the new finance mechanism or the traditional mechanisms, and they have shared the current status of different stakeholders and also the common concerns about forming new funds, who will contribute to the fund and who will be the beneficiary. So these are the tough questions to answer, and also with the treaty signing ahead of us, these questions gain more importance to us. And in operating and in managing these type of financing, I guess that there must be a lot of difficulties and some things to consider. So GCF or GEF, and other than these, financing will need lots of approaches and perspectives. For instance, for the circular economy, we are at the initial stage of circular economy discussion, and in this aspect, we already ask the definition question or taxonomy question and metrics question about the circular economy. And concerning this part, a new deliberation has started, and what kind of new financing mechanism for plastic circular economy should be in place, and what can we learn? So these are the overall and general questions to our discussants.
좋은 질문 주셨습니다.
Thank you for the great question. I'm not sure if I can answer the question fully myself. However, simply put, to talk a little bit more about climate finance, regarding climate change, largely there have been talks about reducing and mitigating greenhouse gas emissions, and secondly, how to adapt to the changing climate, so adaptation. It can be boiled down to two: mitigation and adaptation. So we need to provide support for these two areas. And especially developing countries vulnerable to climate change must receive this support, is the argument that is being made. Relatively, between mitigation and adaptation, from the donor perspective, mitigation seems to be more money-making. However, for adaptation, it seems to be more on the side of a grant, just providing money. So there has been an imbalance between mitigation and adaptation. And on the other hand, there is a loss and damage issue, which can also be related to adaptation, but can be also viewed as a separate issue. Because of the changing climate and changing environment, even if we take measures for adaptation, there may be some losses and damages incurred, and how can we address these? The wording itself, it has to be made very carefully. So addressing losses and damages, that's the extent of the language that we can use. And this is more difficult to tackle because it could lead to potential areas of reward or compensation. And there has been somewhat of a consensus between developing nations and developed nations. And there are talks about the need to provide support to address the damages, and what's the scope that we're talking about when we're talking about damages, and that should be included in NCQG. And who is going to receive the support can also be another question to be answered. And what's the scope of the developing countries who will receive the support, and what's the scope of the donor countries that are going to provide the funds can be other questions. And regarding the challenges of mobilizing climate finance, of course, we have to come up with some finance, but there are not enough sources. We always talk about multilateral, bilateral, and alternative channels. And lately, there's been talk about innovative finance. But frankly speaking, what can we do and how much can we do with innovative finance? I believe what's important in the end is that there is a limit to how much public and private finance can mobilize. Throughout the war in Ukraine, many developed nations are going through a turbulent period in terms of the political landscape. So they could be more focusing on national interest. So the driver and momentum for the global movement has been lost somewhat. So when we're setting objectives for the NCQG negotiations, how can we come up with the common fund? There are, of course, every nation is interested in their own interest, but aid receiving countries may feel that the finance has a condition attached to it. Besides bilateral finance, even though we opt for the multilateral channels, they have to go through the donor countries. Whether we build a mechanism or whether we mobilize funds, the sources where the fund can come from are obvious. But if we change the way we think a little bit, there are many financial resources operated in the private sector. How can we encourage them to make efforts and take part in this? The B and C, Article 2(1)(c) of the Paris Agreement is being debated a lot. It says that all financial resources need to be aligned with low carbon economy and climate change adaptation. So from developing countries and developed countries' perspective, all funds have to be aligned with climate resilient development, not just in the public sector, but also in the private sector. And how can we do that can be another question. And for individual fund perspective, the funds are not too sizable, they're not too significant. Jeff was discussed earlier, and the size of Jeff is not too big. So developing countries want more. They are still hungry, in a way. Then how can we secure more funding? Where can it come from? So my answer wasn't too organized. I apologize. However, so who's going to pay, through what sources, and how are we going to mobilize these funds? Even the existing sources are not sufficient in terms of its size.
Thank you. Well, lacking the financing source, I agree with that status. And all donor countries try to make their work to keep the financing for a specific purpose, but considering the limited resource of financing, that is why I guess that they are talking about the injection of private fund. But to that end, as mentioned by the convention, climate convention, we have to think about the 5 different conventions of water, land, and what kind of mechanisms and investment models could work. And these should be identified at first so that the private sectors will see minimal risks to higher the chances to invest more in these areas. However, in the global community, we still have some case studies. However, in terms of frequency and also scale, it is not enough to persuade the private sector. So that's why Jeff and GEC and other negotiations talk about a way to find out a collaborative manner, and also how to effectively use the fund is another key question for the discussion by Jeff and other climate-related funds. For the stance of developing countries, they would like to maximize the injection of the fund, and to them it is quite primordial to know how fair it will be in terms of the process of selecting the beneficiary country and how to fairly monitor the use of the fund and how to report the progress of the project. And these are the main discussion agenda. But despite of all these efforts, for Jeff, for instance, they try to provide the fund with the biodiversity, but also it is another story to have the stats numbers. So objective monitoring of the report, the result and the progress of the project is quite important, and we have to combine these two different stances of private sector and developing countries before developing a fund and setting up the direction for the future forming of new funds. So in a nutshell, the lack of financing, how to complement that, yes, we are pretty much agreeing with the idea that the private sector's injection is necessary, and how to maximize the reception of the fund to the developing countries that's another question, and how to execute the fund in an efficient way and how to put more engagement of the private sector is the question that we also need to find a solution to. Thank you very much for your answer, and you just have touched upon the importance of expanding the injection of the private fund, and also Ms. Chung has just mentioned that it is still necessary to find out a way to turn those fund execution into numbers and stats. And that's why we tend to prioritize the project that could produce the maximum effect. For instance, plastic use. If you could extend the use of the life cycle of plastics, it could also have the circular economy, and that could also create the co-benefits. For instance, GCF could operate different sorts of funds while evaluating the synergetic effect of different sectors. Do you have that kind of cases? Well, in case of Jeff, desertification, biodiversity, and plastics, and we try to have an integrated program to cover these different areas altogether: biodiversity and land desertification and climate change. And these three sectors have different goals and objectives, and they also have to show objective reports. For instance, the reduce the amount of emission or the protected species or the restoration rate of deserted land. And with that, in each area, we see which result has been made in reality, and we've been monitoring the result of these different areas. And putting the monitoring aside, in operating the integrated program, we also try to evaluate the reduced or the expected reduced amount of emission, and this type of numbers should be submitted in a separate manner so that we can have a comprehensive evaluation. So integrated program, genders, qualitative and quantitative results, such as data, and the result is announced and shared at the board of meeting so that they can prove that there is a synergetic effect.
감사드립니다.
Thank you for the answer. We are also going to have a Q&A session, not just a panel discussion, so I will be taking questions from the floor. Does anybody have a question? Hello, I'm a global green growth supporter, Hansel Lee. First of all, I would like to thank the panelists for the insightful lectures. And my question pertains to climate finance and plastic treaty. I wanted to ask about the connection or correlation between the two, the relationship between the two. We are now awaiting INC5 to take place at the end of this year, and throughout the entire life cycle of plastic, I know that their efforts are taking place to build a treaty concerning the life cycle of plastic. However, for different countries, whether they should reduce production or increase the proportion of recycling, there are different opinions on these two questions. So if this plastic treaty were to be signed, despite the gap between different countries, if we were providing climate finance in terms of the conditions or subject of the recipient of the climate finance, would the entire life cycle of plastic be given equal weight? So there's production and recycling, which I mentioned already, but production, distribution, consumption, disposal, and recycling, there are 5 stages in the life cycle of plastic. So can we finance each step equally? I wanted to talk about the realistic feasibility of this.
상당히 좋은 질문.
That's a great question. So the fund shouldn't go overwhelmingly to one specific area, but should be distributed evenly. So don't we need a mechanism to make sure of that? Can be the gist of your question. And I believe that they are discussing that issue as you presented. I haven't been following up on this. However, in terms of climate finance, I talked about mitigation and adaptation, but the areas in need in developing countries, the needs in developing countries, and the necessary areas for climate change mitigation, they want support in these areas. However, from the donor country perspective, they want to reap some economic benefits in a way. However, despite these differences, there is a common goal, which is to respond to climate change. And plastic pollution can also be a common goal. Tackling plastic pollution can be a common goal. So how can we efficiently use these resources to tackle plastic pollution? As for this question, we need to take a closer look at the data that we have and the capacities of different countries to make that decision. In fact, the statistics or data show that a lot of recycling takes place in Korea, but is it really trustworthy, reliable? And even if the waste is collected properly, but is it being reprocessed and recycled properly? There are some questions from experts in terms of this. Mr. Min-sung Seo, talked about how there can be a top-down approach. However, conversely, as discussed in the Paris Agreement, there can be different areas in which different countries can make efforts depending on their different capacities. So it could be a bottom-up approach as well.
As Dr. Moon has just mentioned, well, let me add some more ideas to that. Well, we want to distribute equally and evenly the plastic resources according to its life cycle. It is quite ideal, but I am not sure if that is something wanted by developing countries, donor countries and recipient countries at all times, because those two sides could have different dreams and different wishes, and it might be useful for us to prioritize to invest where demand is high. And if this demand is shifting from A to B, then we could also follow the trend, and that could be another strategy. And this can only be discovered and recognized only with our experiences on site. And the EPR system is being adopted to different countries. Then we all feel the same way that it might be needed to have an internationally standardized EPR system, but that could be a burden to some countries, and other participating countries say that this should be operated at first level to a national constituency. So yes, that's the current concerns. Thank you. Well, I think we still have time for one more question from the floor. Okay, we'll receive two questions. Good afternoon. I am also from Ministry of Foreign Affairs Global Green Supporters, and as a student who's very much interested in green growth and green finance, I truly enjoyed this conversation. Well, both of you have highlighted the importance of expanding the financing, but also you have pointed out that there's an expanding protectionism of each country. Then personally, I am doubtful if it could really expand or if it could really accommodate more financing. If that is not possible, then how to operate the funding will be more an appropriate question, like setting up the quota for recipient countries. So, between expanding the financing and distributing evenly and equally the financing flow, what do you think is the more prioritized item?
There's another question, so we'll take that question before we answer those two questions altogether. Yeah, thank you for the insightful presentations. As both of you have already said, I agree that the government doesn't have enough money, and even if they can provide support, that there is a limit to how much they can provide. So the private finance, maybe from billionaires such as Bill Gates, can also contribute. In terms of climate change also, maybe we can charge fossil fuel producers. ExxonMobil is making enormous profits, so maybe we can have them pay. BP, Chevron, and ExxonMobil can maybe pay. In terms of plastic too, whether it be producers or importers, we can also ask them to pay so that we can mitigate the pollution caused by plastic and help the developing countries suffering from plastic pollution issues. So in a way, it could be a bold demand, but those demands cannot be really made from governments, maybe from civic groups. And the civic organizations can propose these demands. In order to create an environment where these demands can be freely made, what should we do? What do you think?
대단히 상당히.
Oh, that sounds like a very tough question. And the first question, I think it's all interlinked. I'm not sure if I have organized my thoughts, but from developing countries' perspective, before GCF was established, the complaints was MDBs or World Bank or JEF. There are many multilateral channels, but it takes too long to secure funds through those channels, and it's not easy to secure funds. Those have been constant complaints, so there should be a fund specifically designed for climate change. LDCF, adaptation funds, those are helpful, but they're very small. They are only good enough for several projects only, and we need to maximize and enlarge the size. And many developing countries believe that they are in the most urgent situations and they want support where they're more vulnerable. Those are the demands that have been made constantly. However, your question can be expressed as, or I can put it this way. In this global challenge, why is the private sector less interested comparatively compared to the public sector? Should there be more incentives or conditions where they can provide more support? We always emphasize an enabling environment. However, that could be considered an excuse. From the private sector perspective, whether it's in Korea or in other countries, through these funding projects, if they see some potential interest and if they can see some economic benefits, then maybe they would be more likely to participate. If there can be some financial incentives or policies and measures to drive these financial incentives, that could be helpful. So that's why, starting this year, in the biennial climate change report, it says that the financial resources mobilized by the public sector and the private sector must be reported. It's not just a simple private sector fund report. It's a little bit of a gray area. So through public efforts, how can we increase the private support more? So there should be some voluntary support from the private sector, but how can we encourage more? And what can the global community do to encourage private sector support? I think that could be the extent of my answer to your question.
Well, first, to address your first question, you think that it might not be possible to expand the injection of the financing. Well, it may be increased discreetly. It may not visible, but it still increases. And a single country cannot guarantee 440 million US dollars, for instance. Well, in that case, we could also expect a different combination of donor countries instead of have a single donor country. So we need to put attention to that little change. And when we have limited source of financing, how to effectively distribute the funding flow should be the question. Then we should identify very sophisticatedly who is the neglected beneficiary country. So that is why we put the ceiling of the goal, like 25% of the funding flow should go to a specific area or country. And also for the neglected class, like women and children and native people, and how much funding is flown to these people is also checked and observed through a monitoring process. And this is about how to operate and manage the fund. And this sits in the latter part of the monitoring process. And also, as you have just pointed out, well, if we could obligate the process of investing and financing from the billionaires, for instance, it might be helpful. However, despite the voting rights of the civil society, for instance, or civil organizations, it doesn't hold as much effect as others because we reflect different opinions of respective countries. So the voice of the youth and civil organizations is heard, but I do not feel personally that they are reflected fully to the decision-making process. So, well, our institute has been dealing with ESG very actively in terms of deploying activities, and we tried to suggest legal direction, and we tried to direct stakeholders to the compliance issue. Of course, at the level of enacting negotiation, there could be lots of conflicts and also some pains to conclude. However, the compliance concept can be also educated for the public and for the private sector to come into the area, come into play. This is my personal opinion. And during session 1, some civil organizations have presented on the topic, and I think it might be helpful for them to engage.
One more thing to add regarding reduction. Besides the regulatory market on a national level, the carbon market is the voluntary carbon market is increasing. Besides credits, in what areas were greenhouse gas emissions reduced, and what are the core benefits from the reductions? Depending on those questions, some credits are transacted at $100, or some credits can be sold and bought at $300 to $400, depending on their value. So, Of course, from social responsibility perspectives too, the private sector would make efforts, but we can, to achieve harder to attain technology for community development or addressing climate change, there can be many technologies that can be developed with more incentives, and maybe these mechanisms can be applied to other areas too. Yeah, it's a very important but tough question to answer. One person raised his or her hand to ask one additional question, but I'm sorry that we have to wrap up the session at this point due to time constraints. So this concludes the panel discussion.
Please give them a big round of applause once again to Professor Park and to the panelists. So this brings us to the end of today's program for the 11th Green Roundtable on Global Governance to Address Plastic Pollution. Once again, we'd like to express our sincere appreciation to all the distinguished participants for generously dedicating your valuable time and contributing to this event. I dearly hope that today's event has been as valuable to you as the time you will spend, and that it will be a meaningful step forward on our path to green growth. And we look forward to returning with an even richer contents at next year's Green Roundtable. So, see you next year. Thank you very much.